Yeah, and just watch everybody collapse. Yeah.
Pretend nothing's
Like,
happening.
hi,
Just
snuck it in. It's my mom. You guys ready?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are rolling into another episode of the Candace Owens Show. And man, it is tough out there for a Black conservative like myself. I'm out here trying to fix issues, ladies and gentlemen. I want to talk about issues. I want to fix them. I'm not into the blame game. And there are so many issues that are touching Black America. And one that's really sort of been in the forefront of the news cycle these days is the prison system. Obviously, we know with prison reform going on and the debate going on between the left and the right, what's true, what's false. Here to discuss all things urban reform with me is Charles Blain. He is the founder and director of Urban Reform. Charles, welcome to the Candace Owens Show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I've watched a number of episodes, so I'm really excited to be here and to chat with you about some urban issues.
Anybody call you Chuck?
Yeah, unfortunately they do. They call me Chuck, they call me Charlie, Chaz, a little bit of it all.
People
so I just
think they can just give you a nickname sometimes.
I mean, I don't fight back, so I think that's probably why they just run
people
with
call
it,
me
so.
Candy, and I'm like, no.
Candy.
Candace is
Maybe
good.
in like another 40, 50 years, 60 years.
Right. So I'm actually so thrilled to talk to you today because I was recently talking a lot about the prison system in particular because I have sort of been screaming to people that there are some things that go on that are causing larger issues in society that people are not aware of. And one such thing has been the very bizarre string of Jewish people being attacked in inner cities. And it seems so bizarre because traditionally, all throughout the past, Black Americans and Jewish Americans have sort of had this close relationship, like we've been through stuff and we're together. So this is just so absolutely unusual. And what I remarked to someone is I said, you do know that 80% of all conversions that take place in prison, people are being converted to Islam. And someone was really shocked about that when I said that. And I remember when I lived in Philadelphia and I was shocked to see so many Black Americans wearing hijabs. And I say, because, typically Black Americans are Christian, right?
Yeah.
And I remember speaking to the driver about that, and he had an Uber driver that I had. I sound fancy. It was an Uber driver. And I said, what's going on in the city? Why are so many Black people wearing hijabs? And he said to me, when you go to prison, which was nearby from where I live in Philadelphia, a lot of people are converted and they come out because of this brotherhood and they get protection in the prison system. And I was really, really fascinated by that. So let's start there because you do work trying to bring Christianity into the prisons.
Yeah. So I think you hit the nail on the head with the brotherhood word. I think that is what it is. So the organization I volunteer with and I serve on the Houston Advisory Board of is called Prison Entrepreneurship Program. It's an amazing program in Texas. We teach these guys, because we focus strictly on the male population of folks who are nearing release, 1 to 3 years pre-release. And so we have guys who have done all sorts of crimes. The only thing that we exclude is sexual offenders.
Okay.
And so you talk to them, and a lot of them will tell you that the reason that they've gotten in there, whether this is their first time or their 15th time coming back, is because they were in search of a brotherhood, and that brotherhood or that family led them down the wrong path. And they get into prison, and then they continue to search for that brotherhood, and a lot of times it will lead them to Islam. And so the organization that we do, it's not a Christian organization, but it is rooted in Christian values. I mean, we try to instill that in those guys because you're right. They go into these prisons, in these general population prisons, and they are easily converted to Islam. I mean, it happens left and right in a lot of prisons. And you go walk in the streets of Newark, New Jersey, New York, you see these guys out there, like you said, they're either, preaching Islam and trying to convert people on the streets, or they're just talking about their personal conversion. So you see it and they bring it back to their communities a lot of times.
Right. And I actually said to the Uber driver, because I was so fascinated, I said, because he had converted back. So he spent some time in prison and he converted to Islam, and then he converted back to Christianity. And I said, what was the impetus behind that? And he said, well, when I got into prison, there's fear. I didn't know anybody, and these people came to me and offered me protection. And so I converted and I was suddenly protected and I was a part of a brotherhood. And then when I left, I felt like I owed them something. Then I woke up one day and I realized I don't really know anything about this religion. I converted back to Christianity. And I think that's interesting because what I don't like about that, and by the way, I think people can be whatever religion they want to be, as long as they are not, in the business of hurting other people. What I don't like about that is the idea of taking someone when they're vulnerable.
They're most vulnerable.
Most vulnerable. And offering them protection in exchange to loyalty about, with things that they don't necessarily understand that they're becoming loyal to. I think that's what becomes so cumbersome and so bothersome. And for that rate to be 80% of all conversions, what is the structure like? How is that plausible? What happens in prison that becomes even possible in this country?
Well, again, I think you hit the nail on the head with with vulnerability. They go in there, they're broken, they are alone. You are removed from everyone you've ever known, and now you are trying to find some sort of pathway inside there to survive. And you're looking for some sort of meaning. A lot of them get in there and you get alone, and you just kind of you're alone with yourself, and you start to try to find some sort of deeper meaning in life. And a lot of times, because there are people who are surrounding them and they see this just, I don't want to say, it's not a gang, but you see a group of guys who are kind of rejoicing in this brotherhood, and you see how exciting it is while you're sitting on the outside looking in. You can't help but to get pulled in a lot of times. And I think when you get out, the problem is that, like we said before, they bring that back to their communities. They have young brothers, sisters, children, aunts, uncles, whomever, who look up to them. I talk to a lot of these guys, and they say that, their cousins or their young children will call them and say, I want to be just like you when I grow up. And they're like, no, I don't. No, you don't want to be just like me. You want to do better than I do. But they go back to their communities with these people who are looking up to them, and then it spreads. And then they start to see this too, and they start to pull it in. And so it's nice, like when your Uber driver said that he got pulled back into Christianity, it's nice to see that when they get back, a lot of times, or you hope that when they get back into their environment with their family who does not preach or say those same things, they can get pulled back. But I think it's that vulnerability that pulls them in.
So how did you get involved in the prison system? Like, what made you say, you know what, I want to be a part of the reform of things that are going on? I know you do a lot of work.
Yeah.
How did you get involved?
So about 3 or 4 years ago, I was I work in politics and policy, and I was doing that and met somebody through there who was involved with prison entrepreneurship program. And it was interesting because at the same time, all my life, really, my two oldest brothers have been in and out of incarceration. And so we've always had kind of a distant relationship. I've spoken to them at length, but never very close, we never got very close as brothers. But I never knew how to communicate with them. And I had a lot of uncles who had been in and out of prison. And so I was looking for kind of a way to communicate with them and maybe a way to make some reform, because I was very interested in criminal justice reform, but I didn't know where to go. And it just so happened that I met someone who introduced me to prison entrepreneurship program at that same time. And I was still very reluctant to even go in, because this program, you give up your cell phone. Like, they take your cell phone when you go in, they take your keys, they take your wallet, you have nothing, and you spend the entire day in prison with these guys. And so when they sold me on it, I was like, I don't know about that. That sounds kind of a little crazy. And so it took a couple of months of prodding, and I finally gave up and went in, and I was just hooked from day one. These guys are so remarkable because they're so willing to change, and they're so vulnerable, but in a good way, and no one's taking advantage of that. And they're working with them to make them better and stronger and develop business plans. And it's a really amazing program. So when I first went that day, I was hooked, and there was just no way that I couldn't come back. So I've been coming back ever since.
Right. Yeah. I spent some time in the prisons last year just speaking to some inmates just to get an understanding, because one of the things that I hate is to see people develop a political opinion without any experience. Like, there are people who've never had, any relatives in prison and never been to a prison, but they can tell you exactly how they need to be run, and these people are irredeemable.
There's way too many of those people.
There's so many people. And I just felt like I wanted to sort of look some people in the eye and sort of get an understanding of, what happens when you're in prison for a short time, in prison for a long time. What are the actual problems that these people are facing day in and day out? And a lot of times it is that, if you get in for something the first time, it's very easy to get on that wheel, to get on the merry-go-round, because let's say you're in prison for 3 years, right? And that's a long time, but a short time. And you get out, you've got no job, no connections, you get $50 and a bus ticket. What are you going to do but turn back to a life of crime to be able to support yourself? Because now you've got a felony on your record. Who's going? And I think the longer you're in the system, the harder it is to pull it back, right? But that early time can be so important.
Right.
So the people that you're spending time with in prison, are they from all over, or are some of these people in prison for life?
So most of them have been in prison for a long time and are nearing release. No one that we work with is going to be remaining in prison for life unless they commit another crime. So they're kind of on their way out, and we're trying to give them a better pathway forward. So we're helping them develop business plans, but we're also kind of just surrounding them. We provide transition homes so they can go and stay there instead of going back directly into that community they came from. Give them some time to readjust. We provide them links to jobs, try to help them out so that they can get work and kind of get on their feet. So I think you made a good point, is that when they come out, very often, you can't rent an apartment because you have,
Felony.
you're blocked from doing that. Sometimes, and a lot of times, they will not even let you rent an Airbnb because of that.
Wow.
Can't get a job. You try to work for Uber, you might not get it. Like, there's just really no ways for you to move forward very often. So what we try to do is give them a way to create their own opportunity, because entrepreneurship, in my opinion, is the best way to kind of get out of that, the lower socioeconomic status that they're stuck in. And so we try to teach them the just kind of rules of business, how they can create a business, what they need to do, the rules they need to follow, how to have a business lunch, exchange business cards, everything that we learn on the outside that they just never had the opportunity to do. And then we kind of put them out there and put them in the transition home and guide them. They get mentors, they get people who work with them throughout the process. And we see remarkable results because of this, because you cannot just take somebody and push them outside of prison and with $50 and a bus ticket and tell them to go restart your life. You need to surround them. And if you're going to take them out of society and remove them from everything they know, I know a lot of people don't like to say that government needs to provide that kind of safety net in the end, but if we don't, we're not going to have any opportunity to actually reform these people. And luckily, the organization I work with is a nonprofit, so they don't deal with any government funding. But I think the larger issue is that our prisons need to figure out a way to soften the blow of letting these guys back into the real world, because it's too much of an adjustment.
It is, and I think after a long time, people don't know how to adjust. So I've had,
Right.
I have uncles that have been in and out of the system, and they would come out and they'd go right back in, because after enough time, it starts to feel like home. You don't even
Right.
know how to be a
Right.
person or function outside. So you're actually more comfortable because you're used to the stability of your actual prison life.
Yeah.
You live in Texas, Houston.
Yes.
And
yes.
Texas is a great state in terms of talking about prison reform. They really lead the charge, as well as South Carolina, in reducing recidivism rates. They've been able to actually close prisons, if I'm correct,
Yeah.
over the last 10 years or so, because they don't have any inmates to fill them with. And that's interesting because that's a red state.
Right.
And it kind of goes against the whole idea of, Texans and Southern people being super harsh on crime and wanting
Right.
people to be in there forever.
Right.
And you have an interesting story about that. You sort of adjusted your opinion about, red states. You started as you a Democrat, is that correct?
Well, no, I started as kind of just uninterested in politics completely. I had no interest whatsoever.
Apolitical, like me, how I started.
Completely apolitical, but my entire family, I was just kind of inundated with Democrats left and right. And so grew up in New Jersey before I moved to Texas, and started working when I was 15. I was working at a local supermarket called Pathmark, was in the union, kind of bought into that. No political interests, but just kind of working and thinking that they're protecting my rights and all this kind of stuff. And so my parents, New Jersey Education Association union members, they did everything that you would expect of union members. I mean, they organized. I saw it firsthand. I was brought to a lot of these things, so I saw it. I call her my grandmother. She's not my biological grandmother, but my nana, she was the vice chair of the Democratic Party in our county. I mean, they were blue through and through. And so when it came time for me to vote for the first time, which was 2008, I kind of had this decision between Obama and McCain, and I was just kind of looking at it, and in New Jersey, we had closed primaries, and you have to register as a party when you get ready to go vote. So never had a discussion about politics with my parents, just kind of watched it from the sidelines. So my dad's excited to take me to vote for the first time, and we go down there, and they asked me to publicly declare which party I was going to vote for, and I said Republican, and his face was just blank. I mean, he did not say a word to me until we got back home when my mom asked how it went, and he told her to ask me. So really interesting day that day. But the reason that I got to that point was because, I was working at Pathmark doing minimum wage work during high school, and the conversation on the national level during this presidential election was about taxing the wealthy more, taxing business owners more because they weren't paying their fair share. And so the first thing I could think of, which was kind of the most simple correlation I can make, was that I'm at the bottom of the rung at this job. I've been here maybe a year and a half. I'm making minimum wage. If they decide to raise taxes on the folks who are employing me, I'm going to be the one that's cut. I'm not going to have money to go buy like Nikes.
Right.
Like that was,
right.
That's kind of the correlation I made.
Common sense.
Exactly.
You did this thing called common sense.
Right, exactly, which is like hard to find nowadays, surprisingly.
Right.
So, I decided to kind of go with McCain, and really, I hate to say it today, but that was all I based my vote on at the time. But it did did start a path for me to start looking for more and trying to find a deeper connection to conservatism and try to find why I actually aligned with it so much.
So you based your whole vote on Nikes.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, that's what it comes down to, right? I got him though. I kept that job. Right?
I kept the job. I got the Nikes.
But yeah, I mean, and that's really what it came down to, because I had to make that kind of simple correlation because I was not paying attention to anything else. And that was just really where the rubber met the road for me. And so I voted for McCain, and ever since then I've just kind of dug deeper into conservatism and tried to figure out where I align, and the more I look, that's where it is.
Right, exactly. And that's an incredible thing to talk about, because talking about people just thinking that you can force a minimum wage and that, business owners aren't going to do the common sense thing and say, well, I can't afford to pay everybody here $15, so I'm just going to get rid of one person. And it's incredible that people don't understand that you can't just create this into a la-la land. You can't just pretend that business owners can afford certain things that they can't afford.
Right. And the frustrating part is that the people you often see advocating for stuff like this are the ones who are going to be most hurt by it, immediately hurt by it. And they don't make that correlation, and it frustrates me to no end, because they are advocating for things that are going to put themselves out of jobs. And, if they're going to raise minimum wage from, $12 to $15, well, it's not that you're going to all of a sudden make $15. You're probably not going to have a job. That's what that's going to be. So what is better, $12 or having a job?
Or
no dollars. Right.
Right. And it's so important.
So frustrating to see that argument happen without looking at where the rubber meets the road and who's going to be hurt by this.
Right. And the truth is the injustice is being done in our school system, because they aren't learning that sort of practicality, just in terms of thinking, using your brain. Hi, you pretend you're a business owner and these are your employees and you have X amount of dollars that you're making.
Right.
We don't spend time on that. Instead, we spend so much time on social justice, right? Like, and you see that even in the prison argument, by the way, where people are just like, social justice. What was the story recently? The Alabama prisons, I
don't know if I saw this
one. It might be Mississippi. I think it's Mississippi, actually, where it's been trending recently, that they've found that a lot of inmates are dying in prison. And I think, and do not quote me, I think Jay-Z has gotten behind this. He has some charity, and they're demanding that the governor of Mississippi or Alabama, don't quote me here, does something to fix this. So you look at it, bird's eye view, you go, wow, a lot of inmates are dying in this prison. Like, what's going on? But they're not being killed they're being killed by other inmates, and all this other stuff is going on. So what do you want them to just let everybody be free?
What's the solution?
What is the solution? Just, there's too many people in prison, just let everybody be free. Right? That's not the solution. That will lead to chaos. You can't just start saying to people, because you guys have murdered each other so much, we're just going to let all of you guys,
And I think too often people like to look at policy that way. It's a feel-good policy with a good intent, but the outcome is not good. I mean, you have to look at the root problem and address that. You cannot judge policy based on intent, because a lot of times we see on the back end it is not good, the outcome that is produced by this policy.
Right.
So yeah, you often see that, and it's really frustrating. I mean, it's great to feel good about things, but if we're actually supposed to be making changes and reforming things, you've got to look at the root causes, and you've got to be serious and sober about addressing those things.
What do you think are some of the biggest issues facing the prison system right now? Like, what do you think are the things that need to be reformed?
I mean, what I like to see, so in Texas specifically, one thing that we currently have is, and this is a law that's been tried to change numerous times, and I testified in the state legislature on this, is that if you are, and it's not exactly in the prison, but it leads to the prisons, if you are, say, driving with a broken taillight in Texas, you can technically be arrested for that. And so you can be arrested for that, have to go to jail, say you didn't have the money to get the taillight fixed. You likely don't have the money to bond yourself out. So you're going to lose your job probably. Might not be able to make a car payment. You're going to lose the car with the broken taillight. Might lose your apartment, and it's going to kind of trickle down. And I think that's in kind of our court system, where there needs to be more discretion, but also less discretion for officers to arrest for things like that, those misdemeanors that don't really amount to much. And I think just when it comes to, there are other like kind of minor issues, like Harris County. There was this conversation, which is the county Houston is in. It's the third largest county in the country, first largest in Texas. There was a conversation about reducing commissary costs for prisoners, because they are making, the county was making much more money than it actually cost to give these items to the prisoners, to supply this in-prison store with the items. So they were making a lot of money from it and overcharging on these prisoners. So they were talking about reducing commissary costs. And I think it's important because you want to have basic stuff in prison. I think things like that are quite important. Same thing with cost for calls. I think it makes it very difficult to communicate with your loved ones when the calls are too expensive and you can't do so. And I think it goes to our original point that the more that we separate folks from their families and from their original support systems, if they have good support systems, the more they get caught up into this other stuff while they're in there. And so to try to keep that connected, I think that's helpful. But I mean, there are just so many issues. I think, and I agree, what I think is that, obviously, the president has done a lot of work when it comes to reforming our entire system, and I've been super excited about seeing some more stuff come out about that. The Alice Johnson thing has been so heartwarming for me. I saw her the other day at Texas Public Policy Foundation. I was doing a speech, and she kind of came and sat in, and to kind of see the embodiment of actual policy change, it's like remarkable. I mean, it is such an amazing experience to see someone whose life has been saved by something that happened in D.C., and you don't see that every day. So,
and to see her just give back and want to be a part of it and say,
without
how
hesitation,
can I,
without hesitation, yeah.
Right. But she's still tethered to reality. I mean, and I think it's so important because there can be extremes on both sides where people, I think far left, it's release everybody. Nobody should ever be in prison. And it's like, no, check some of these stories.
Some of them should.
Some people should be in prison, right? Yeah. And then you have people sometimes that can be so far right that they are just like, if you make a broken taillight, you're in prison, you're irredeemable. Throw the key and lock it away. Right. And I think a lot of the good stuff sort of takes place in the middle, the more moderate perspective. And I always say to people that I'm so tethered to the reality of growing up with uncles that served time in prison, and I will never believe that, that these people are just irredeemable. There's a lot of things that we can do to stop people, from just leading that life of crime and going back and forth. So what does your family think about what you do now?
So, after, how long has it been? After about 10 years of trying to convince me to convert, they've kind of given up a little bit, but like a tinge of it is still there every now and then. What's interesting is I'm really appreciative of my parents because they fought me along the way every single step of the way. So it's made me a better defender of my values and my arguments because it's just always been tested. And my mom's going to hate that I tell this story, but when I first voted, she was quite unhappy. So then when the second time came around, and it was voting for Obama Romney, she tried to convince me to vote for Obama by showing me this picture that she had. It was like a painted portrait that I don't know where she got from, of Nelson Mandela, Barack Obama, and like Malcolm X. And I was like, okay, those three, what? There's a weird combination of people. And then she's like, what if I die today and you look at this picture and tell me that you can go on knowing that you didn't vote for him? And I'm like, that is a very
the emotional plea.
Goodness. And I didn't. And so we got over that, luckily. But, what I appreciate is that while they disagree with me on politics, they appreciate the work that I'm doing because they know it's genuine. They know it's coming from a good place, and they know I'm trying hard to actually do good stuff for people. And so I think they appreciate that enough. And so we'll never agree on politics, probably, but at least they've come to just accept it.
Well, in your mother's defense, Mitt Romney's pretty much a Democrat.
Yeah, well, yes, right? This is true. This is true. She was right. I was like,
she was totally right. Right. You're choosing
maybe I should have
just
voted for Obama.
Exactly. Well, that's super incredible. So you said you also mentioned that your brothers have served some time.
Yeah.
Do they recognize the work that you do? Do you have a good relationship with them?
Yeah, so we've gotten a better relationship as time has gone on that I've been doing this work. So it's really great. I mean, politically, no, they don't agree with the work that I do. But when it comes to kind of the volunteerism and the criminal justice reform work, they wholeheartedly agree with that. And so it's nice to see that. I do think that they feel that I'm kind of advocating for them in a sense.
Right.
And I feel that way too, now that we've kind of been able to break down those barriers and have that relationship.
Right.
So they've come to accept it. But no one in my family has accepted my political beliefs yet.
That's interesting, though, because in terms of what you're saying, and realizing that it's sort of like the political beliefs and the conservative perspective that sort of led you down this line of work, you would think that your brothers who have spent time in prison would be the first one to then maybe be interested in why it is that you went down that route.
Right, I know. And it's interesting because you can tie it into so many different things. Like I look at folks in cities who, vote the same way or support the same policies that harm them, and they don't care. Like they look at me as I'm the enemy when I come in and try to say, hey, free market solutions to urban issues.
Right.
So I think it's the same thing. I think there's just kind of this ingrained mentality a lot of times when it comes to politics, and it's just this kind of my team, your team kind of thing where people just don't want to budge.
Right. Is urban reform considered a charity?
So we are a C4, So we are a political advocacy group. We're a nonprofit political advocacy group. And so, we just try to beat the drum on these issues in cities and try to get people more engaged with them and let them know that while you might not like me and my politics, the folks that you're supporting and the policies that you're supporting are making it harder for life in cities. So that's what we try to do.
And that is really sort of the way to really say what I feel so close to my heart is that I wonder sometimes, and me, obviously, my political conversion from liberal to conservative is just realizing that, on the one hand, you have people, the issues are never going to get fixed, because they've sort of developed this system where they realize that they can constantly stump on the issues, they can fundraise on the issues. There's no incentive, for them to want to see these issues go away when they're gaining power and they're gaining influence and they're gaining money off of these issues. And on the conservative perspective, for me, I have just realized that these are people that are actually trying to address the issues, take away all the emotionality, and see how you can actually make things better. And as a Black person, speaking to a Black person, it can be the most frustrating experience being a Black conservative and being the one that you feel like is actually fixing the issues and yet still having to deal with the brunt of people questioning whether or not you're Black, right?
Yeah,
how could you be Black? You want to fix it, right? How could you possibly, Black people, we just be moaning about it. Nobody should actually want to fix it.
Nobody should step up and do anything. And it's like, well, somebody has to. What are we going to do? Just complain and complain and complain? Because we've done that for years and nothing has changed.
People are comfortable with that.
Yes, I think they are comfortable with it. And again, I think it goes to a point you made where a lot of these, whether it's people or whether it's entities, they are, they exist to exist. They say they're addressing an issue, but really they're just doing it to fundraise. A friend of mine always talks about homeless charities and how their goal should be to go out of business. Like they shouldn't be fundraising to build a bigger building. They should be fundraising to go out of business. And I think you see a lot of these kind of, shysters, if you will, who are just fundraising and trying to keep themselves going because they know that there's a problem here that they can exploit.
Like the NAACP.
Yes, well,
why would they want race issues to go away if they can make millions and millions of dollars if the race over here, of course they don't want to fix the issues.
Exactly. There's there are a lot of like housing groups that talk about affordable housing and things that could be done to help, make housing more affordable, but they never seem to talk about how, people who are renting pay property taxes too, right? Property taxes are built into rental rates because a landlord isn't eating the cost of their property tax. They're passing it on to renters. But why don't they tell renters that? Why don't they tell renters that they have a stake in the system and they should be vocal about this and they should be more, angry and get more involved? There are a lot of groups who aren't given full information because if they did, they might then take up arms and try to do something themselves.
They might be empowered, right? And that's why I say it all comes down to education. And you have to spend the time to educate yourself. You have to be willing to speak to people that disagree with you, but you also have to be willing to speak to people that have a real experience in the topic that you're trying to get a better sense of and a better understanding of. So, I applaud you on everything that you're doing. Is there anything that you want to mention that I haven't touched on that urban reform does aside from working on the prisons?
Really, that's kind of the brunt of what we do. So urban reform, the goal here is to look at urban issues and to find solutions rooted in the free market that can solve them. So whether, we're getting like hyper local and talking about issues like illegal dumping in inner city communities or, blight in inner city communities. We talk about these issues and the problem, why these problems exist and how government is more often than not,
always making it worse.
The problem exists. To give one quick example, in Third Ward, it's a community in Houston. They have a ton of vacant lots around Third Ward, and the problem with these vacant lots is that they just they're magnets for illicit activity. People come in, whether it's drugs, whether it's prostitution, whatever the case may be. Kids can't use them. It's dangerous. It makes neighborhoods more dangerous. And the reason that exists, even though community members want to do things with them, like make, community parks and do just different things, the reason it exists is because most of the lots are owned by government and the government is reluctant or completely refusing to allow these citizens to do anything with that property. Wow. So we see a lot of these issues and they're driven by government. So the purpose of urban reform is just to highlight that and to let people know that whether you're a donor, whether you are an activist, whether you're just a person who lives in an apartment and, goes to work every day and doesn't think about politics, you have a voice and you need to use that and you need to be engaged because whether you're engaged or not, things are going to happen and you might as well put your voice into it and try to nudge it a little bit so that it helps in your direction rather than goes in the other direction.
Yeah, it's funny because I was obviously formerly apolitical. You were formerly apolitical. And now when I meet people and they say like, oh, I don't do politics, my first thing I say to them is every single thing in your life is dictated by politics, right? So what you're telling me is that you just don't care to get engaged and you happy to let people make the decisions for you.
Yeah.
Because your life is big. You do politics. You do politics every single
day.
day.
Every decision you make. I mean,
Everything
even if
you
it's
do.
driving down the road,
Right.
you're
do
doing
politics.
it. You're
Yeah.
doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the most important thing. And I think, especially for Black Americans, so many people consider themselves apolitical because we have so many other issues, and we don't realize that the source of so many of the issues, like you said, is government.
Right.
And so we don't think that voting matters, or don't think that paying attention to political debates matters, or paying attention to even who your local congressmen are matters. It all matters. Everything that you do, I cannot stress enough to the world, is dictated by politics.
Yes.
So we wrap every episode, which I know you watch my show. Obviously, you watch my show, by allowing you to leave a 2-minute face message to the world. Just your call to action. If every person could hear that message and do something today, what would that be? And this is the camera you're going to look into. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
With
my raspy voice. Yes.
Yeah, it's good. Raspy's good. On your mark, get set. World, I give you Charles Blain.
Hey guys, so thanks for tuning in. So we talked a lot about local issues today, and what we said numerous times here were that people deal in politics every single day of their lives, whether they want to or not. So because of that, that's more of a reason that you should be engaged in the process. We focus at Urban Reform heavily on the local level because I truly feel that's where impact can be made much easier and much quicker. The things that your city council passes on a weekly basis, you're going to feel the following week. That might not happen with your state legislature or with Congress. And your city council members are much easier to get in touch with than your congressmen and your state legislators as well. So I implore you to get involved. There are so many issues in our cities that free market idealists need to be addressing and that we have the solutions to. And I think it's a shame if we don't take the opportunity to try to fight for people who need it the most. 12 million families in this country pay more than 50% of their income on rent. As you heard us mention before, a lot of that is driven by property taxes, which are driven by local government. That is enough of a reason right there to get involved. I think we have so much opportunity to do change in our cities, and if we don't start now, the problem's only going to get worse and it's going to be harder to fix. So I ask you guys to get involved. Call your local city council member, whether you live in a city, a town, unincorporated areas of your county. There are ways for you to get involved. Look for it, say something, do something, just be a little bit involved because even the slightest bit of effort will change a ton. Thank you.
Perfect. What was the timing? Only 30 seconds left.
Oh,
you nailed that.
Oh, awesome.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
That's a wrap.
You.
Thank you guys for watching the latest episode of the Candace Owens Show. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As many of you guys already know, PragerU is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which means we need your help to keep all of our content free to the public. Please consider making a tax-deductible donation today. I would really appreciate your support.